If the Lee family wanted a war, I would give them a wedding first. I did not come here to steal your bloody money. I came here to show the world exactly what you are.
What have you done? Look here!
The cold porcelain of the bathroom sink dug into Layla's shaking hands as she stared at the decrypted autopsy report. The Lee family. The signature at the bottom stared back at her, dripping with the blood of her murdered parents. Just beyond the heavy oak door, the man she loved, the man who had just bled to save her, was waiting on one knee with a diamond ring. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she violently wiped it away. The terrified hospital nurse was dead. The golden dragon was awake. She carefully folded the damning evidence, smoothed her dress, and unlocked the door. If the Lee family wanted a war, she would give them a wedding first. For Layla Carter, the transition from an orphaned ER nurse to the queen of the underworld was forged in blood and betrayal. But the ultimate betrayal was hiding in the hands of the man who swore to protect her. Armed with the forged evidence of her parents' assassination, Layla accepts Lee Woo-Joon's proposal. She smiles for the cameras, playing the perfect Mafia bride while secretly plotting his absolute ruin. She launches a massive medical charity, publicly offering free healthcare to the city, but secretly using its underground facilities to fund a rogue spy network. As Layla digs into the Lee family archives, the tension skyrockets. Woo-Joon is a lethal, calculating boss. He senses the shift in his new wife and begins to watch her closely. But when Layla finally breaches the deepest security files, the narrative flips entirely. The Lee family signature was a flawless forgery. Woo-Joon's family is innocent. The real mastermind is one of her own, a trusted golden dragon elder who orchestrated the murders to control the unimaginable financial power tied to Layla's bloodline. Now, the woman who married her husband to destroy him must confess her sins, beg for his help, and fight by his side to save their lives. The cold sink dug into Layla's shaking hands. She stared at the old autopsy report, her tears falling on the faded paper. At the very bottom, a dark, encrypted signature stared back at her. It was the Lee family seal. The family of the man she loved had ordered the brutal murder of her parents. Her heart shattered into a million pieces. How could Woo-Joon's bloodline be responsible for her greatest pain? Just outside the heavy bathroom door, Woo-Joon was waiting on one knee with a perfect diamond ring. She wiped her tears away fiercely. The scared nurse was gone forever. The golden dragon queen was awake, and she was hungry for justice. Layla unlocked the door and stepped into the soft light. Woo-Joon looked up at her with pure love. She smiled, hiding her dark fury, and whispered yes. She leaned down and kissed him deeply, sealing her deadly promise. If his family wanted a war, she would give them a beautiful wedding first. The massive penthouse quickly filled with expensive silk and white roses. Preparations for the royal underworld wedding had officially begun. During the day, Layla played the part of the perfect, glowing bride. She smiled for the cameras and held Woo-Joon's hand, fooling everyone in the city. But when the sun went down, her true mission started. Late at night, while Woo-Joon slept, Layla crept into the dark study. She used a secure, untraceable phone to contact the hidden shadows of the Golden Dragon Syndicate. She was supposed to be a figurehead, but she was quietly building her own army. She carefully selected loyal guards who hated the Lee family. She whispered secret orders into the dark, turning her own wedding guards into a deadly spy network. She was trapped in a beautiful golden cage, but she was already picking the lock. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked loudly in the silent hallway. Someone was awake. Had Woo-Joon caught her in the act of building her secret army? Layla stood proudly before the terrifying syndicate council. She demanded millions of dollars to build a massive medical charity. The powerful elders laughed at first, but she slammed her fist on the table, proving she was a true queen. They quickly gave her the money. Within weeks, Layla opened a beautiful, free clinic for the city. Woo-Joon proudly stood by her side, completely unaware of her real plan. The bright hospital floors were just a clever mask. Deep underground, in the secure, off-the-books basement, Layla built a high-tech spy headquarters. Her loyal agents worked in the shadows, digging into decades of dark Lee family history. They tracked bank accounts, old weapons deals, and hidden enemies. Layla wanted to know exactly who signed her parents' death warrant before she burned the empire down. One evening, her top hacker rushed into the basement with a pale face. He handed Layla a hard drive. "You need to see this," he whispered. "We found a hidden vault." Lee Woo-Joon did not become a powerful mafia boss by being blind. He had lethal, razor-sharp instincts, and those instincts were screaming at him. He started noticing the tiny, subtle changes in his beautiful bride. When she thought he was not looking, the warmth in her dark eyes turned to absolute ice. He noticed she locked her phone every time he walked into the room. Her secretive, late-night trips to the new charity clinic made no sense. A dangerous, silent cat-and-mouse game began between the husband and wife. Woo-Joon started asking quiet questions, testing her answers for lies. He assigned his most trusted guards to follow her medical vans. Layla felt the heavy weight of his dark, suspicious gaze everywhere she went. She knew she was walking on a deadly tightrope. If he discovered her underground spy network, he would execute everyone involved. One night, Woo-Joon cornered her in the grand kitchen. He stepped close, his voice low, dangerous rumble. "What are you hiding from me?" The wedding day finally arrived, stopping the entire underworld in its tracks. Layla walked slowly down the long, candlelit aisle in a stunning black and gold gown. She looked like a fierce, untouchable goddess. The crowded room held its breath. As she reached the altar, Woo-Joon took her shaking hands. His dark, sharp eyes were entirely soft, filled with absolute, blinding devotion. He looked at her as if she were his whole world. It was a heartbreaking sight. Everyone watching thought this was a beautiful romance, but it was actually a deadly trap. Layla stared into the eyes of the man she was secretly planning to destroy. As they exchanged their heavy, traditional vows, she felt a terrible pang of guilt in her chest. Did she still love this monster? The honeymoon was supposed to be a dream, but for Layla, it was a beautiful nightmare. Every night, she lay perfectly still in the massive silk bed. She listened to the slow, steady breathing of the man sleeping right next to her. Woo-Joon's strong arm rested heavily across her waist, making her skin burn. She wanted to lean into his warmth, fighting her own breaking heart. How could she still love the monster who killed her family? One evening, Woo-Joon surprised her with a gorgeous diamond necklace. As he fastened it behind her neck, his lips brushed her skin. She forced a bright smile, hiding the cold terror freezing her blood. But as she looked into the mirror, she noticed something terrible. Woo-Joon was not looking at the necklace. His dark, sharp eyes were locked onto the reflection of her phone screen on the dressing table. A secret message from her underground spies had just lit up the dark room. Did he read it? Layla used her new medical charity to hide her deadly spy mission. Bright white ambulances drove quickly across the busy city, flashing their red lights. But these vans were not carrying sick patients. Hidden inside the back of the vehicles, elite hackers tapped into underground data cables. They quietly broke into the oldest, most secure digital vaults of the Lee family empire. Back in the secret clinic basement, Layla watched the computer screens glow with endless green text. Her loyal spies were successfully stealing decades of hidden financial records and secret operational plans. Every downloaded file brought her one step closer to proving Woo-Joon's dark crimes. "We are in," her lead hacker whispered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The download bar slowly crawled to 99%. Suddenly, a loud, blaring alarm ripped through the quiet basement. The computer screens flashed bright, blinding red. Someone inside the Lee estate had just triggered a counterattack program. The system was locking down. Were her secret hackers trapped inside the enemy network? The loud alarm was only the beginning of the nightmare. Later that night, Woo-Joon's right-hand man, Sung-woo, dragged a bleeding man into the grand living room. Layla's heart stopped. It was one of her best investigators, The loyal spy had been caught taking pictures of the Lee estate's security gates. Woo-Joon sat slowly in his heavy leather chair, his face completely empty of emotion. "Who sent you?" Woo-Joon asked softly, his voice colder than solid ice. The bleeding spy kept his mouth tightly shut, staring bravely at the floor. Layla stood frozen in the corner of the room, her fingernails digging painfully into her own palms. She was forced to watch as Sung-woo raised a heavy metal pipe to strike the man again. She wanted to scream, to beg them to stop, but she had to protect her deadly secret. If she showed any mercy, Woo-Joon would know she was the traitor. Just as the heavy pipe swung down, the bleeding spy suddenly looked up. He locked eyes directly with Layla. Would he betray his queen? The bleeding spy stared deeply into Layla's terrified eyes. He was in terrible pain, and she knew he could not stay silent much longer. Taking a shaky breath, Layla slightly tilted her head and tapped her thumb twice against her dress. It was the secret hand signal of the Golden Dragon. A tragic smile crossed the brave investigator's bruised face. Without a single word of hesitation, he bit down hard on a fake tooth. A hidden poison capsule broke instantly in his mouth. He gasped once, collapsing lifelessly onto the expensive marble floor. He had died to protect his queen. Woo-Joon leaped from his chair, his dark eyes blazing with absolute terrifying fury. He grabbed the dead man by his collar, roaring in anger. "There is a rat in my own home!" Woo-Joon shouted, his voice echoing loudly through the massive penthouse. He slowly turned around, his suspicious eyes scanning the quiet room. His deadly gaze finally landed directly on Layla. He slowly walked toward her, his fists clenched tight. Layla barely escaped Woo-Joon's terrible anger, claiming she was just a frightened wife. The next morning, she secretly rushed the stolen data drive to an underground cryptographer. The old, brilliant man lived in a dark, hidden room beneath the city subway. He plugged the drive into his glowing computers, his eyes moving quickly across the stolen Lee family records. Layla handed him the horrible autopsy report of her parents. "I need you to match the digital ink and the timestamps," she ordered softly. The old man worked for hours, comparing the dark signature against decades of old Mafia movements. The room was perfectly silent except for the clicking of his keyboard. Suddenly, the cryptographer gasped loudly, completely shocked. He slowly turned his computer monitor so Layla could see the glowing red text. "This signature is a fake," the old man whispered. "The Lee family retired this seal 5 years before your parents were murdered." Layla felt the whole room spin. If Woo-Joon's family was innocent, who really killed her parents? The old cryptographer pointed his shaking finger at the bright computer screen. Layla leaned in closely, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Look at the digital ink," the brilliant man whispered. He pulled up a secret Lee family file from 25 years ago. The dark signature matched perfectly, but then he pulled up a file from the year her parents were brutally murdered. The Lee family seal had completely changed. "The signature on your parents' autopsy report is a flawless fake," the cryptographer explained. "The Lee family retired this exact seal 5 years before the assassination even happened." Layla felt the cold, damp air of the hidden basement crush her lungs. The document had been expertly altered years later. Someone had carefully planned this deadly lie. If Woo-Joon and his powerful family did not order the hit on her parents, who did? And why did they want her to declare a bloody war against her own husband? The shocking realization hit Layla like a speeding freight train. She stumbled backward, gasping for air in the dim underground room. Woo-Joon's family was entirely framed. They were innocent. Someone had deliberately planted that altered autopsy report in her hands. They wanted her to use her hidden Golden Dragon army to destroy the Lee Empire from the inside. Her entire reason for revenge was a terrible, dangerous lie. She thought about Woo-Joon's dark, devoted eyes. She remembered the warmth of his touch and how he had bled on the riverbank to save her life. She was currently sleeping next to an innocent man she had secretly promised to kill. A heavy, sickening guilt twisted violently in her stomach. She had built a massive spy network to ruin her own loyal husband. But if the Lee family was framed, who handed her the forged documents? A dark memory suddenly flashed in her mind. It was the old, terrifying man from her own wedding day. Layla rushed back to the secure charity clinic, her mind racing with pure panic. She wiped away her tears of heavy guilt and locked the steel basement doors behind her. Her loyal spies looked up from their glowing computer screens, waiting for her command. "Stop tracking the Lee family immediately," Layla ordered, her voice shaking but firm. "We have the wrong target." She pulled out the dark memory of the terrifying ancient man who gave her the secret envelope. It was Elder Park, a powerful leader of her own Golden Dragon syndicate. Layla ordered her elite hackers to pivot their entire mission. They needed to dig deep into the private, heavily guarded files of the very elders who crowned her queen. It was a wildly dangerous move. If the cruel elders caught her spying on them, they would execute her for treason. The hackers began breaking through the ancient syndicate firewalls. Suddenly, the main screen flashed with millions of hidden numbers. What were the elders hiding? Layla stared in absolute shock as the massive numbers scrolled across the glowing monitors. Her top hacker opened a series of hidden offshore mega accounts. They were not looking at thousands of dollars, they were looking at billions. Layla finally uncovered the true, horrifying motive behind her parents' brutal murder. They were not killed over dangerous street territory or mafia pride. They were killed because the direct Golden Dragon bloodline legally controlled this unimaginable fortune. When her parents were assassinated, the greedy elders secretly took total control of the endless money. They hid Layla in a poor orphanage to keep her away from her rightful throne. Now that she was back, she was a massive threat to their stolen wealth. Elder Park had framed Woo-Joon so the two powerful families would destroy each other, leaving the elders rich and safe. But as Layla downloaded the explosive financial evidence, a sudden, chilling message popped up on her screen. "I see you, little queen." The terrifying message on the screen made Layla's blood freeze completely. Elder Park, the cruel mastermind behind the terrible forgery, was watching her every digital move. The ancient, wicked man sat in his dark, heavily guarded mansion across the city. He smiled a cold, evil smile. He realized Layla's hackers had suddenly stopped attacking Woo-Joon's secure network. She was now digging aggressively into his own secret financial records. Elder Park knew instantly that the clever new queen had discovered his dark truth. She knew he had ordered the brutal hit on her parents. He could not let her expose his massive crimes to the rest of the underworld. He picked up his heavy, gold-plated phone and dialed a deadly number. "The little bird has left her cage," Elder Park whispered to his private team of ruthless assassins. "Burn the medical charity to the ground and do not let her escape." The heavy steel doors of the clinic basement suddenly began to rattle violently. The heavy steel doors of the charity clinic suddenly exploded inward. Thick black smoke filled the bright hospital hallways. Layla grabbed a heavy fire extinguisher, pushing her terrified nursing staff behind her. Dozens of heavily armed men marched through the broken glass, wearing the dark, familiar masks of the Golden Dragon syndicate. Her own people were here to kill her. The terrible realization hit Layla hard. Elder Park had officially ordered her execution. She swung the heavy metal extinguisher, knocking the first deadly assassin to the cold floor. Bullets shattered the medical cabinets around her, raining sharp glass down like dangerous hail. She fought like a wild animal to protect the innocent doctors, but there were too many enemies. Her secret spies in the basement were trapped, fighting their own bloody battle below. Just as a massive killer aimed his heavy weapon right at her chest, the clinic's back wall suddenly blew wide open. Who was breaking in now? The back wall of the clinic crumbled into a massive pile of dust and broken bricks. Woo-Joon stepped fiercely through the smoke, his dark suit covered in ash. He had been secretly tracking his suspicious wife for days. Now, he raised his heavy weapons and unleashed a storm of bullets. His highly trained Lee family guards quickly surrounded the terrified clinic, shooting down the dangerous Golden Dragon assassins one by one. Layla dropped her weapon, gasping for air as the terrible gunfight finally ended in a heavy silence. Woo-Joon turned to her, his sharp eyes filled with deep relief and sudden shock. He looked past her bruised face and saw the glowing computer screens in the broken basement. He saw her hidden spies bleeding on the floor. His beautiful, innocent charity clinic was actually a high-tech spy base. He slowly lowered his gun, his face turning completely pale. What terrible secrets was his lovely wife hiding from him? The ruined clinic was perfectly quiet except for the sound of falling glass. Layla looked at Woo-Joon's completely betrayed face and finally broke down. Hot tears spilled down her dirty cheeks. "I married you because I thought your family killed mine," she sobbed openly, confessing her dark lie. She explained the fake autopsy report and her dangerous plan for revenge. Woo-Joon stood frozen like a stone statue. His absolute blind devotion shattered into a million painful pieces. He realized their entire beautiful romance was built on a deadly trap. A heartbreaking sadness filled his dark eyes. Without saying a single angry word, Woo-Joon slowly reached into his suit jacket. He pulled out his heavy black gun and held it out to her. "If killing me will finally give you peace, do it," he whispered, his deep voice cracking with pure agony. Layla stared at the deadly weapon in his shaking hand. Would she pull the trigger and finish her dark mission? Layla let out a loud, painful cry and completely dropped the heavy gun to the floor. It clattered against the broken glass, echoing in the quiet room. She refused to shoot the innocent man she truly loved. Woo-Joon stared at the dropped weapon, slowly realizing she was finally choosing him over her dark revenge. He swallowed his deep pride and gently pulled her shaking body into a tight, warm hug. "We will find the real monster together," he promised softly into her hair. In the dusty ruins of the destroyed clinic, the powerful husband and wife agreed to an uneasy but vital truce. They combined his lethal, brilliant military tactics with her surviving Golden Dragon spies. Together, they formed a massive, unstoppable united front. The dangerous secrets were finally gone, replaced by a deadly, burning need for true justice. But as they gathered their remaining forces, Woo-Joon's secure phone suddenly buzzed with a terrible warning message. What new nightmare was starting? Far across the dark city, Elder Park was already moving his deadly chess pieces. The cruel old man stood before a massive secret meeting of the city's worst syndicate bosses. He spun a brilliant, wicked lie to the dangerous crowd. "Lee Woo-Joon has completely brainwashed our innocent Golden Dragon Queen," Elder Park shouted, his voice echoing with fake sadness. "He is trying to steal our ancient empire." The rival Mafia leaders growled in anger, easily falling for his clever trap. Elder Park expertly manipulated their deep fears and violent greed. He commanded them to unite their separate armies into one massive, unstoppable force. He offered millions of dollars to anyone who brought him Woo-Joon's head. The entire criminal underworld prepared for a brutal, bloody war. Thousands of heavily armed mercenaries began marching directly toward the peaceful Lee estate. Layla and Woo-Joon were trapped inside with nowhere to run. Could their new, fragile alliance survive an attack from the entire city? The dark city quickly turned into a terrifying, fiery nightmare. Full-scale syndicate war erupted on every street corner. Innocent people ran for their lives as heavily armed gangs fought for control. Layla refused to hide in a safe penthouse. She transformed the remaining floor of her ruined medical charity into a heavily fortified hospital. Dozens of terrified, bleeding civilians were carried through the broken doors. Layla worked tirelessly, using her old nursing skills to bandage deep wounds and save lives. The sound of exploding cars echoed loudly outside the thin walls. She looked down at a scared, injured little boy and promised him he would survive. But the violent war was moving closer. The floor violently shook as a massive explosion hit the street right outside the clinic. Layla grabbed her medical kit, her heart pounding. Through the thick black smoke pouring in the window, she saw a terrifying shadow approaching. Who was leading the deadly army to their front door? Outside the fragile clinic, Lee Woo-Joon became a brilliant, deadly monster. He stood perfectly still behind a ruined ambulance, leading his loyal men in a brutal defense. Wave after wave of Elder Park's cruel mercenaries rushed the hospital gates. Woo-Joon fired his heavy weapons with perfect, terrifying speed, refusing to let a single enemy pass. He was completely covered in dust and sweat, fighting like a man who had everything to lose. He knew his beautiful wife was saving innocent lives just a few feet behind him. He would gladly die before he let anyone hurt her again. Bullets shattered the brick walls around his head, but he did not blink. His elite guards fought fiercely, matching his deadly energy, but the endless enemy army kept coming. Suddenly, Woo-Joon's gun clicked completely empty. A massive, heavily armored mercenary charged right at him with a sharp, glowing knife. How could Woo-Joon survive without a single bullet left in his weapon? Woo-Joon narrowly dodged the sharp knife, slamming his heavy, empty gun into the mercenary's head. The massive man collapsed, but Woo-Joon knew this defense could not last forever. They were losing a terrible war of numbers. He rushed inside the dusty clinic, grabbing Layla's hand tightly. "We cannot win this by hiding," he panted, his chest heaving. Layla wiped the blood from her cheek and nodded bravely. They had to strike the evil heart of the enemy. Leaving the brave hospital guards to protect the innocent, the husband and wife slipped out through a secret underground sewer grate. They raced through the dark, rushing water toward Elder Park's highly secure financial stronghold. It was a hidden underground fortress filled with stolen billions. They planned to drain his massive bank accounts and strip away all his power. As they finally reached the heavy steel doors of the underground bunker, Layla noticed a strange, blinking red light. Was it a silent security alarm? Layla quickly smashed the blinking red light with a heavy rock, praying the silent alarm did not trigger. Woo-Joon easily picked the complicated lock on the heavy steel doors. They crept quietly into the bright, perfectly clean hallways of the underground stronghold. Suddenly, a dozen heavily armed guards rushed around the corner. Layla and Woo-Joon did not hesitate. They moved together in perfect, deadly synchronization. Fighting back to back, they were a beautiful, unstoppable machine of war. Woo-Joon disarmed the guards while Layla used swift, precise strikes to knock them completely unconscious. They quickly fought their way to the center of the fortress. Before them stood the massive, shining titanium door of the main financial vault. Layla pulled out her stolen digital cracking device, plugging it directly into the heavy keypad. The bright screen flashed green as millions of stolen dollars prepared to transfer. But, as the heavy titanium vault door slowly swung open, a cold, cruel laugh echoed from the dark shadows inside. Who was waiting for them? The heavy titanium door swung wide open, revealing a terrifying trap. Elder Park sat comfortably in a leather chair, surrounded by a massive detail of elite, heavily armed killers. The cruel old man smiled, his eyes completely empty of mercy. "Welcome, little queen," he whispered darkly. Before Layla could pull her weapon, 3 massive guards grabbed her arms, pinning her violently against the cold vault wall. Woo-Joon roared in terrible anger, rushing forward to save her. But a heavy rifle was instantly smashed into the back of his knees. He crashed hard to the shiny floor, completely surrounded by deadly weapons pointing right at his head. Elder Park slowly stood up, pulling a shining silver pistol. He walked toward the defeated couple, aiming the deadly barrel directly at Layla's heart. He was preparing to execute them both and end the powerful Golden Dragon bloodline forever. As Elder Park's finger slowly squeezed the heavy trigger, a sudden blinding flash filled the room. The blinding flash was not a weapon. It was a hidden camera on Layla's chest. Elder Park laughed, completely unaware of the tiny blinking light. He lowered his silver pistol, wanting to enjoy his dark victory. He paced across the shiny vault floor, arrogantly boasting about his perfect, deadly plan. "You really thought you could defeat me, little queen," the wicked old man sneered. "Your parents died because your bloodline is far too powerful. They controlled the endless billions, so I had them slaughtered in their own home." He leaned in close to Layla's face, his breath smelling like cold ash. You were never meant to wear the golden crown. You were meant to be a forgotten ghost in a cheap orphanage." Layla stared back with freezing, absolute calm. She did not cry, and she did not beg for her life. Instead, a slow, dangerous smile crept across her beautiful face. What secret weapon was she holding? Layla's cold smile made the cruel old man step back in sudden fear. She slowly tapped the small, glowing pin hidden on her dark shirt. "I did not come here to steal your bloody money," Layla whispered, her voice ringing clearly in the silent vault. "I came here to show the world exactly what you are." She pressed the tiny button. Instantly, a secure satellite transmitter sent Elder Park's terrible confession across the entire city. Every single Mafia boss, gang leader, and powerful syndicate elder received the live video directly to their private phones. The criminal underworld watched in absolute shock as the wicked mastermind proudly admitted to murdering their true rulers. Elder Park's own phone buzzed loudly in his pocket, flashing with angry messages from the furious council. His face turned completely pale. He finally realized his perfect, deadly trap had just snapped shut on his own neck. Would his loyal, heavily armed guards still protect a confirmed traitor? Hearing the terrible truth, the elite guards slowly lowered their heavy weapons. They looked at each other in deep confusion. They had sworn a blood oath to protect the Golden Dragon Syndicate, not a murdering traitor. In that single split second of hesitation, Lee Woo-Joon exploded into violent motion. He twisted his body powerfully, disarming the massive guard holding him down. He tossed a heavy pistol directly to Layla before diving behind a thick stack of gold bars. A fierce, close-quarters firefight instantly broke out inside the bright, shining vault. Bullets bounced off the solid titanium walls with loud, deafening pings. Layla shot perfectly, taking down the corrupt mercenaries who still tried to protect the evil elder. The air filled with thick gray smoke and the sharp smell of burning gunpowder. Woo-Joon fought like a wild, protective tiger, clearing a safe path for his brave wife. Through the heavy gunfire, Layla saw Elder Park crawling desperately toward the open vault door. Could she catch him? Layla broke free from the deadly crossfire and sprinted toward the open titanium door. Elder Park scrambled desperately on his hands and knees, crying like a frightened child. He tried to pull a hidden dagger from his boot, but Layla was much faster. She kicked the sharp blade out of his shaking hand and grabbed him fiercely by his expensive collar. She violently, physically overpowered the old man, slamming him hard against the cold concrete wall. She refused to execute him in the dark like a coward. Instead, she dragged the broken, defeated mastermind out of the smoking stronghold and into the rainy night. Dozens of black, armored vehicles were already waiting in the wet street. The furious syndicate council had arrived. The powerful underworld leaders stepped out of their cars, glaring angrily at the bloody, shaking traitor. Layla threw Elder Park onto the wet pavement right at their expensive shoes. But as the angry council drew their weapons, someone suddenly shouted. Who was trying to stop them? It was not a hidden enemy shouting in the rain. It was Woo-Joon, stepping proudly out of the smoke. He handed Layla the ancient golden ring of the true syndicate leader. The angry council bowed deeply, officially letting Elder Park face their dark, heavy justice. The long, bloody war was finally completely over. Layla officially took control of the massive Golden Dragon Empire, instantly absorbing its endless billions of dollars. But instead of ruling from the dark shadows through fear and deceit, she stepped into the bright, healing light. She used the incredible wealth to fund massive hospitals all over the entire world. In the final beautiful scene, Layla and Woo-Joon stood closely side by side on their high penthouse balcony. They looked out over the glowing, peaceful city together. They were a true queen and king, ruling the newly united underworld as perfect equals. Their unbreakable bond was forever forged in fire and absolute trust. Could anyone ever challenge their united empire again? Even in a world filled with betrayal, power, and darkness, the truth will always find its way to the light. Layla's journey reminds us that strength is not just about revenge. It's about courage, truth and choosing love over hatred. When enemies become allies and the truth finally surfaces, even the most broken past can forge an unbreakable future. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemy, it's discovering who truly stands beside you. Lessons from the story. Truth always surfaces. Lies can last for years, but the truth eventually breaks through. Revenge can blind us. Acting on anger without knowing the full story can destroy what we value most. Trust is powerful. Real strength comes from loyalty and unity, not suspicion. Your past doesn't define your future. No matter where you start, you can rise and build something greater. True leadership protects others. Real power is using influence to help and heal people. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, comment your thoughts below, subscribe for more powerful stories, share this with someone who loves epic storytelling. Thanks for watching.